you all for coming today. As you know, we are here to address the UK's role and hold them accountable for their complicity in the world's biggest humanitarian crisis and conflict in Sudan, rooted in struggles in resources and wealth, whilst also shedding light and address the lack of media attention surrounding the conflict in Sudan, which has resulted in the deaths of thousands, the displacement of millions, and the pressing need for humanitarian assistance for 25 million people. London for Sudan is against the SAF and the RSF, but we're also against every external factors and organisations that play a part in this war on civilians. The UAE for fueling the crisis, the UN, yes, a boo for UAE, guys. The UAE for fueling this crisis, the UN for doing little to nothing, media outlets for the lack of coverage, and the UK for its complicity. All of this causing damage, human rights abuses, sexual violence, and the killings of thousands of civilians. The crisis in Sudan should be international news. Despite the devastating impact of the war, the conflict has been overshadowed by other global crises. The most severe humanitarian emergency crisis labelled by the UN lacks sufficient international media coverage and public awareness, leading to limited humanitarian funding, assistance, and lack of urgency. We are here today to urge the UK government to acknowledge its mistake, prioritise justice and accountability in response to the crisis in Sudan. We can play a pivotal role in shedding light on the plight of the Sudanese people, garnering support for humanitarian efforts and urging the UK government to take action and intervene through mediation and aid provision. We released an action last night to urge attendees to take immediate action to email Foreign Secretary David Cameron, Minister of State for Development and Africa Andrew Mitchell. We want the UK to be accountable, we want sanctions against the UAE, and we want to mobilise support for vital humanitarian efforts in Sudan. You can find our email template in our bio on Instagram. Yeah, London for Sudan. Human Rights Watch recently released a pretty astonishing report detailing ethnic cleansing in West Darfur, highlighting the atrocities faced by many marginalised communities like the Maslit tribe, including killings, forced displacement, sexual violence, and children being piled up and shot. We want to start off our speeches by doing a 1-minute silence for Darfur and every single marginalised person and community that are being persecuted, murdered, and raped in Sudan. So please join us.
It's wonderful to see so many of you here, all here for Sudan. We've got a number of speakers here for you today. The first one is Ziad, who's been one of the organisers of this march, part of London for Sudan. He's also a part of Medania, so give a big round of applause for Ziad.
Also guys, he's literally a baby, he's 17, so give him a round of applause.
There's a reason that we chose the BBC to march from and to. The amount of risk that journalists in Sudan go through every day just to get information out of Sudan and to other countries is just incredible. In the last couple of months, we've seen Halima Idris Salim run over by RSF soldiers. We've seen journalists being assassinated in their own homes. We've seen just a couple of days ago Abdelaziz Mahmoud Arja being kidnapped by the RSF for reporting on their genocide against the Masalit tribe. And through all this, like we see no solidarity or willingness to protect journalists in Sudan. Just radio silence. And above this as well, we see even MPs trying to defend the UAE like Nadeem Zahawi did 2 weeks ago, going above and beyond to defend the UAE and their complicity in genocide, and implying that allegations against the UAE supporting the RSF is Iranian aggression. And Nadeem Zahawi, who used his powers as an MP to pass legislation to recognize the Anfal genocide against the Kurds in Iraq, is now going out of his way to defend a complicit party in genocide in Sudan right now. And you might wonder, like, why he goes to such lengths. He was actually a middleman between Redbird IMI and the Barclays family for the potential purchase of the Telegraph by the UAE, which just fell through. Redbird IMI is owned by Mansour bin Zayed, who was one of the last people to meet with Hemeti just weeks before the war started. And Right after the UK went to the UN to try to have the Sudanese complaint against the UAE be heard, Redbird IMI dropped their bid. And Nadim Zahawi, I guess, had some sort of tantrum about him not being able to enjoy the fruits of the blood of our people. So we see MPs more than just Nadim Zahawi. There's David Cameron, for example, who led initiatives for the UAE to buy up property here in the UK, which includes this telegraph bid that I just mentioned. There are many MPs compromised by Emirati interests. We must combat this. Currently, there is an urgent need to divest to and from the UAE in this country. The UAE has spent at least a decade buying up businesses, property, land here in this country. And of course the UK, which itself put the ruling families of the UAE into power in the 70s through their colonial occupation, put Zayed and others into power, have a massive responsibility for supporting this Emirati regime. On top of this, there is a private sector complicity as well, with BP and Shell owning massive shares in the state-owned Emirati ADNOC company. 10% for BP, 15% for Shell, who make record profits off of the gas that they export from the Emirat. As well as this, there is the MBDA military-industrial company, which has an active relationship with Nimr Automotive LLC, which has been proven by the RSF's own propaganda videos that Nimr vehicles have been used by the RSF. MBDA designs anti-aircraft and anti-tank turrets for these Nimr vehicles. These same vehicles with these same turrets are being used against Sudanese, against Africans in the West, in Darfur, being used to kill us, being used to massacre us, and this must be addressed and must be opposed. We must apply pressure on our officials to do three things: to declare a famine in Sudan. Declaring famine is what saved South Sudan in 2017 from a complete hunger calamity, and to declare that the RSF is committing genocide and that the UAE and its allies are complicit in this genocide. To support the efforts of the resistance committees and the emergency rooms on the ground right now, who, to avoid their responsibilities, the Western powers have said that they are political actors and will not help them as such, even though we have seen that the UN ran out of Sudan in the first 5 days of the war. Shame on them. 97% of aid that has been given to the Sudanese people is through the emergency rooms and through the resistance committees, and denying, simply closing their eyes and thinking that these are political actors is a complete lie. As well as this, the UK must stop caving into the UAE and not, as it has done, postponed deliberations against the UAE in the United Nations. Coming back to the media, there is on both sides of the belligerents, we see lies being propagated by the Kazan and by the RSF. We see channels like Sky News Arabia or like TRT, who lie to protect their allies and their in the Sudan war currently.
Shame.
We also see as well on the social media side and on the PR side, the RSF has been utilizing PR companies in the UAE and even a company owned by an ex-Mossad agent, a Canadian PR company owned by an ex-Mossad agent, an Israeli services agent, Ari Ben Manasha, who has been cleaning up the RSF's image. We've been seeing Zionists use our country's war/famine/genocide in bad faith and bringing it up as if to say that Gaza is not is less important than Sudan. We are all one in our struggles against genocide. Both belligerents were pro-normalization before and after the war. Hemeti has gone on record actually denying Palestinian pain and or like denying the occupation. Burhan has gone saying that Israeli ties were key to locking up civilian activists. The Israelis, before and after the war, have been supplying weapons to the RSF, such as the LAR-160 artillery system, such as the Galil rifle, which is itself named after the occupied Palestinian region of Jalil Galilei. We've seen before as well them selling to both the SAF and the RSF and the Sudanese police surveillance equipment, anti-riot equipment, which I actually remember. I was in Sudan after the coup in 2021, remembering the skunk water that was unleashed on us, the Israeli skunk water used against protesters. So people like David Lammy, who came out recently and said that the student protesters should also talk about Sudan. And they do, by the way. He himself, David Lammy, who met with Abdullah bin Zayed on the 5th of October, despite him not even being in the government right now, just being a shadow cabinet MP. These people who bring up our names in bad faith are actually the ones who support certain countries backing the genocide being carried out right now.
Shame on them. Shame.
We must demand that famine must be declared, that these killings against Africans, against African tribes, to be named as a genocide for what it is. It is a genocide.
Yes.
We must demand that countries support homegrown grassroots efforts to support our people going through these massacres right now. That they revoke their classing of the resistance committees as political groups, when in fact they have been helping the Sudanese people since the war started, and filling in where international NGOs have failed us. No to UAE complicity, no to MPs who deny our suffering or use our suffering as a tool. No to the genocide, no to the war. Free Sudan, free everyone who is being oppressed right now.
War Coalition. She has been with Stop the War to speak to us today.
Thank you very much. I'm from the Stop the War Coalition. We were organised for the last 21 years since the events of 9/11 to oppose British wars around the world, particularly in Afghanistan and Iraq and Libya. And I want to show solidarity today with you protesting about the war in Sudan, because although Britain is not directly involved like it was in those wars, it is playing a very damaging and central role in terms of backing the arms dealers, in terms of backing its allies like the UAE, like Egypt, like Israel, who are providing weapons and providing other equipment for the war that is going on. And this is a war against civilians. It is a war which is one of the worst humanitarian disasters in the world. Last year, the worst amount of food shortage was in Sudan. There is famine going on there. You know this better than I know it. But we need to put this down not just to what is going on in Sudan itself, but to the whole system which allows these things to happen.
Yes.
And there, Britain has a tremendous responsibility. People talk about this as the forgotten war, but we shouldn't forget, and many people haven't forgotten, Britain's role. Britain's role as an imperialist power, the British Empire in the 19th century, the role of Britain in the 20th century, and it still continues today. They aren't directly involved in the colonial countries like they were in the 19th century, but they are doing their best to extract the wealth, to allow people to remain poor, and to encourage these kind of wars which divide and rule and do nothing for the ordinary people of Africa anywhere. And it's an incredible thing, really, that they talk about these things, and we want human rights, we're in favour of democracy, we're in favour of these things. When there is a war like that, they say nothing. And then when people flee the war, whether it's from Sudan, whether it's Afghanistan, whether it's Iraq, anywhere else, Syria, anywhere else, what do when people come here? They treat them like scapegoats. They try to refuse them entry. They want them to send them to Rwanda in one of the most filthy operations going on, an absolutely filthy one. And it's not just the Tory party, it is unfortunately Labour who is encouraging this kind of thing. And what we've got in Britain today is a scapegoating of migrants and also a rise in state racism. That there is more and more racism going on. When they talk about the Palestine marches as hate marches, what do they mean? They mean it's got Muslims on it, and they want to equate Muslim with extremism, with terrorism. That's what they want to do. To let them do that, because we know the truth is that the Muslim community, like many other communities in this country, is standing up for what is right and what is true, and we will continue to do so. I went on my first demonstration in 1969, and that was against apartheid South Africa. And I've been demonstrating pretty much ever since, with greater or less success. But I have to say, if we didn't demonstrate, we would not achieve even the things that we do. If we stay silent, we do not achieve the things that we do. If we do not stand up and be counted for our sisters and brothers everywhere around the world who are suffering oppression, who are suffering in the way that people in Sudan are suffering, then we do not have the right to call ourselves decent human beings, because that is the very minimum that should be required. Now, when it comes to the British government, I think there's two things we should be doing. There's three things. One is we have to get this war in Sudan into the headlines of the papers, onto the television, and into the other campaigns. We know there is a mass campaign over Palestine. We know there are huge demonstrations all the time and lots of local activities every day. Our job is to bring Sudan into the Palestine movement. They are our sisters and brothers. We all have the same enemy. I was born in London. I've never been to Sudan, but when I see a boot on somebody's neck, I know what side I'm on. And that's true for many, many people in this country. So let's turn the Palestine movement into one which deals with colonialism everywhere, and where we try to fight to do these things. The final thing I'd like to say is that part of this has to be fighting against racism and in defence of the refugees. We live in a world which is getting more and more dangerous. Arms spending all the time is being raised. They've got money for arms, but they don't have money for your children's education. They don't have money for hospitals. They don't have money for housing. So we need a different priority going on here. So let's fight on all these things. Let's organise. Solidarity to you. I think it's fantastic you've organised this demonstration today. And Stop the War will support your demonstrations in the future and anything that we can do. So solidarity, and we will win. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Layla Musa Medani. She's come all the way from Sudan to share her personal experiences and stories. She's a member of of the You Are Not Alone community, the Sudanese Women's Union, and the Black and Ethnic Minority Group. So give a huge round of applause to them.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. اللهم أنت السلام ومنك السلام، تباركت يا ذو الجلال والإكرام. الله هو السلام في كل حتة. السلام عليكم ممتد. السلام عليكم from Sudan, extended from everyone in Sudan. Thank you so much for being here, to every single one of you for marching and attending. I won't keep you long because I think everything is being said. I just want you to remember when you go back home, for the last 1.5 years, there is no education in Sudan, none at all, from the kindergarten until the universities. No education at all. There is no medical treatment. The medical staff being either assassinated or humanized, or being chased out of the country. There is no banks, there is no money. Imagine when you go home and you want to buy something to eat, there is no money, there is no cash in hand. There is no transport because there is no fuel. You can walk, imagine walking this distance, and the distance you walk today, you can multiply it by 10 times. Someone walking to fetch water or fuel, wood for cooking. This is a situation in Sudan. This is a situation in Sudan. People, I can say, they forgot about us, but today I'm very proud and I'm very honored to see all of you young, really very proud of all of you. You are here. You have taken you are the beacon of peace to be in the earth, to be in the world, to be everywhere. We want peace everywhere. We want the war to be stopped. Stop the war everywhere, everywhere, everywhere. Stop the war everywhere, everywhere. This is what I want you to take from today march, and imagine children with no food, no education, no medical treatment, and they are chased from place to place, from borough to borough, from town to town by bullet overhead. Thank you so much indeed. I want to remind you also on the 1st of June, we have another march. You will see it, and I wish you will give me your honor and attend our march. You are all of you in my heart, and I'm very proud to see you and to know you, all of you.
Is Belle Ribeiro Addy, who is the Labour MP for Streatham. She has been the Labour MP since 2019 and heads the All-Parliamentary Labour Committee for Africa Reparations.
Guys, can we give a massive round of applause for our first ever MP that's spoken about Sudan in our marches? We're just really happy that it's a black MP, a black woman MP. So she's worked very closely with Diane Abbott, and she always represents marginalized organizations, marginalized people, marginalized groups. So please give her a massive round of applause.
Thank you very much, everybody, and thank you so much for inviting me to speak today. I don't need to tell you all that what's happening in Sudan is horrific, and it's shameful that the world and the media continues to look away. So thank you to all of you for everything you continue to do to push this situation up the political agenda and to document what's happening in Sudan. But I think it's really important to highlight the facts, because when you hear about what's happening, people don't understand why it's not had more airtime. So just since April 2023, nearly 16,000 people killed. The total number of people forced from their homes and internally displaced in Sudan has now surpassed 9 million, making it the largest internal displacement crisis in the entire world. 18 million facing acute food shortages. 5 million on the brink of famine, war crimes upon war crimes, including sexual violence against women and children. And just this week we had a detailed and appalling report from Human Rights Watch about the RSF's year-long campaign of ethnic cleansing against the Saleh tribe, which has killed and displaced thousands. Now, as Israeli tanks roll into Rafah, hundreds of thousands of citizens in El Fasher are being besieged by genocidal forces. So why is the conflict in Sudan getting so little attention in the UK and around the whole world? Now, I don't think it's solely because our attention and our resources are both fixed on the devastating atrocities being perpetuated against Palestinians or Russia's appalling invasion of Ukraine. There is more than enough airtime to report children being piled up and shot in El Fasher and the millions being displaced and facing genocide. And whilst there has been a communications blackout across Sudan, there is no shortage of credible information out there about exactly what is happening. The absence of this coverage, of this conflict, of this genocide is undoubtedly shaped by racism, colorism and geopolitics. We see 3.7 million people have been internally displaced in Ukraine, but there are 9 million internally displaced in Sudan. The Sudanese community in the UK is about the same size as the Ukrainian community. And when the war in Ukraine broke out, it's right that we did what we could to support Ukrainian refugees. And you know, I don't believe our government has done enough to support Ukrainian refugees. But I have to ask, with 9 million people displaced in Sudan, where is the Homes for Sudan scheme? Why is it that when I go to immigration detention centres and to asylum hotels, it's people from Sudan that are left in limbo and uncertainty and interrogated about why they could actually return home when we see exactly what is happening in Sudan? I think the real key to understanding the lack of outcry over what is happening in Sudan lies in the deep roots of empire and its aftermath in Britain's enduring colonial mentality. Understanding the current conflict means that we have to acknowledge the imperial fault lines that run all across it. Empire supporters used to boast about bringing civilization to other areas of the globe and preventing lesser peoples from tearing each other apart. But it was the British Empire that tore northern and southern Sudan apart. And conflicts seen in Sudan since independence are the lasting consequences of divide and rule strategies used to carve up territory under colonial rule. There is a modern version of this colonial mentality in which we tell ourselves that the tribes continue to war with each other whilst we are doing everything to promote peace. But really, what exactly is it that the UK are doing? The colonial mentality still has a huge sway in British society, and it's really powerful. And it means that people can easily dismiss or simply ignore calls for justice, for genuine peace, and for real democracy. The reality of the situation is that Britain's history as a former colonial power in Sudan means that we have a particular responsibility to the Sudanese people. Now, there isn't a silver bullet to end this war overnight, but there must be hope, and that hope lies with the Sudanese people. It has been tragic to see and witness the civilian revolution for peace and a democratic Sudan be put down by the military, including the Khartoum massacre of June 2019. The first priority is that the fighting has to stop. Civilians need to be safe and there needs to be a ceasefire. Arms shipments have now overtaken aid shipments, and that has to end. The UK needs to exert greater diplomatic pressure on the RSF through various regional allies that are supporting both sides, Egypt and the UAE in particular, to make sure that aid flows more freely and that we can prevent a famine. And where diplomacy doesn't work, we need concrete action on this. And given the atrocities reported by the RSF, particularly in Darfur, there should be sanctions against their arms suppliers. Above all, military rule in Sudan needs to end so that the people of Sudan have a chance at a life where their basic rights are protected. There has to be a genuine democratic civilian transition, not a top-down imposition of neoliberal economic policies. And when the time comes, military leaders must be held to account for ethnic cleansing, war crimes and genocide. Whenever we say never again, we need to mean it, and wherever it happens in the world. So thank you again for inviting me to speak and for everything you're doing to keep eyes on Sudan. Do not give up the fight.
Thank you for everyone that came out to support Sudan and support our families and our loved ones back home in Sudan. It really does mean a lot to us. You know, we've been in this crisis for over a year, but many people call it the world's forgotten war. Well, it's not a forgotten war. It's the world's biggest ignored war. So it's been 1 year of this gruesome war that's resulted in the world's largest displacement crisis, and it's one of the worst humanitarian crises. And according to the WFP, is actually under threat of being the world's worst hunger crisis as well. But what I want to highlight here is that this famine is a man-made hunger crisis. This is not because Sudan is a poor country. This is not because Sudan has no resources. This is because Sudan is exploited. Sudan is oppressed. Sudan has been under colonial rule and neo-colonial rule even after 1956, and this is what's happening in Sudan, and this is the result of what's happening in Sudan. Right now, as many of the speakers have spoken before me, there are 800,000 people at risk in Al-Fashir in North Darfur, where analysts and experts are calling it a kill box, meaning that they are under threat of genocidal violence from the Rapid Support Forces, or the Janjaweed, as we in Sudan call them, who have a history of killing on ethnic basis and carrying out extreme sexual and gender-based violence and countless other war crimes that they've been able to carry out with absolute impunity. Shame on them. They continue to be funded and materially supported by the UAE, a UK ally, despite it being in direct violation of a UN arms embargo that has been in place since the early 2000s. And the UK, when given a chance to confront and stop this, chose to ignore it and make excuses for the UAE at the Security Council. Shame on them, shame on Rishi Sunak, shame on the Tory government. And the UK still continues to be one of the largest arms and weapons exporters to the UAE. They continue to do business with the UAE, and they continue to support and legitimize their actions. And this needs to end. We in the diaspora and abroad need to be united in calling for a direct sanctioning of the RSF and a direct sanctioning of all outside influences, which include the UAE, to stop funding this counter-revolutionary war. And I highlight that this is a counter-revolutionary war. This is a war against the people that rose up against military violence and military rule in Sudan, that rose up against exploitation and rose up against being used for the resources of Sudan. 50 to 80% of Sudan's gold is currently being illegally smuggled out of Sudan to countries like the UAE and Russia. But also, I want to shame and highlight the Sudanese armed forces, which I don't think is being done enough. They are also complicit in war crimes and extreme violence, and we cannot ignore this. We cannot ignore what they have done to our brothers and sisters in Darfur, in the Nuba Mountains, and the Blue Nile. They have been carrying a campaign of ethnic cleansing and violence and exploitations along with the RSF and the Janjaweed since before this war started. And we cannot ignore that. We cannot ignore the fact that Egypt, Iran, Ukraine, and so many other countries continue to supply the Sudanese armed forces and sustain and continue to drag on this war. We must call for the end of blocking of humanitarian assistance, which both sides are guilty of doing, and it is through this continued sustained involvement of international powers that this war and senseless violence is continuing in Sudan. The international community are the ones who ignored the millions of protesters that came out in 2018 and 2019 to call for a free and peaceful Sudan and put an end to military rule. And the international community is the ones who legitimized Burhan and Hemedti and put us in this position. They are the ones who enabled and empowered them to carry out the atrocities of June 3rd and the coup of October 21st, and it is our duty in the diaspora and abroad to make people aware of this. This is not a Sudan versus Sudan crisis. This is not Sudanese killing Sudanese, not just Sudanese killing Sudanese, but other foreign powers are involved in this. And anyone who supports the process of decolonization should be supporting us in Sudan. Burhan and Hemeti fight for power to evade justice and cement control over Sudan. They are backed by these malign forces who wish to exploit Sudan and prioritize their financial gains and development over the suffering of black lives and black people. And yet the world continues to ignore our pleas for help. Shame on them. Did we not all chant Black Lives Matter in 2020? Do black lives still matter in 2024? Or is that care and activism limited to black lives in the West? We must continue to act and advocate for Sudan. We must continue to uplift each other and come together to call for a ceasefire in Sudan. We must continue to call for an end to the blocking of humanitarian assistance, for the opening of safe and legal pathways for those wishing to flee the violence to come to Sudan. And we must call for a free Sudan. Free of the violence and exploitation of the military and neo-colonial powers, free for us to be able to realize the goals of our revolution, to achieve a Sudan where freedom, peace, and justice are actualized. Thank you everyone for coming out today.
17 coups. Many people won't know that, so spread the word. And not by chance, most importantly.
Not by chance.
So we've got a new speaker, wonderfully, who's agreed to speak just now. His name is Yiz. He's from Novo, which is a media outlet, and he's here to speak to us. Give up for Yiz.
We all know that there's something strange about a world that sees Sudanese lives as less valuable than some white lives, than some British lives, than some American lives. But we know that's not true, right? We know that Sudanese lives matter, right? That black lives matter, right? They want to tell us about 15,000, hundreds of thousands, tens and tens and tens of thousands of people have been killed. We're talking about two rival militias. People want to portray it as if this is some sort of internal struggle that has nothing to do with us. There's some kind of civil war. What kind of civil war sees millions of people become refugees overnight? What kind of civil war sees an ally of the United Kingdom continue to supply weapons to militias? That's not a civil war. What's happening in Sudan is tantamount to mass killing, it's tantamount to genocide, it's tantamount to murder at a mass scale. And they want to say that, oh, perhaps we haven't heard about it, but you're hearing about it now. Because people like you are making people hear about it right now. And we're not going to stop. We're not going to stop putting the issue forward because we know that our Sudanese brothers and sisters matter. I went to school with Sudanese brothers and sisters. And those Sudanese brothers and sisters probably wouldn't have been in the same school as me if it had not been for the global system failing our brothers and sisters in the early 2000s. In all the coups that my brother mentioned before, the world has failed time and time again. But enough is enough. No more and not again. We stand here. We take a stand here to say that by any means necessary, by all means necessary, with every single fiber of our being, that we're going to fight until the blood stops pouring, until little boys and girls are not made into orphans, until human beings stop being refugees by force because it's not normal. I'm sick and tired of seeing a media like Sky News, of seeing the BBC ignore every single day the black and brown bodies that are piling up. Bodies and piles of children piling up, and they want to tell you that it doesn't matter. We say no, we reject that. We reject any single sort of ideology, any single sort of media, any sort of politician who wants to tell you that some human being somewhere doesn't matter. We reject that. All human beings matter. Our Sudanese brothers and sisters matter, and black lives matter. They matter. They matter. So it's very important that you continue to organise, that you support the London for Sudans, that you support the Sudanese legal networks, that you support the home tax, that you support every single organisation that is made up of people just like you, made up of people just like you who all have something to offer. Sometimes people want to delude you into thinking that you can't make a difference, that you coming out to stand in the sun is not making a difference. But right now you're changing hearts and minds. You're changing the idea that you can't do anything about it, changing the intransigence that pessimism creates. We're here to create hope. We're here to say that we are the hope. We are the future. The people in Sudan right now are our future. The people people in Africa right now are our future, and we will not let them go. We will not let them go. We will not let them go. We will not say to our brothers and sisters that you don't matter. We will hold them. From here, from France, from the US, from wherever we are, we insist that Sudanese people have the right to live in peace and freedom and security, and they deserve justice, because if you and me deserve justice, then they damn well do too. If they... So just to close, continue to mobilize, continue to organize. Don't get tired, because that little boy or girl running from a Sudanese militia officer, that little boy or girl, that mother, that father right now, who is running from an RSF soldier, those people in El Fasher who are facing certain extermination at the hands of the RSF, if you forget them now, if you give up now, if you give in now, then you have sacrificed life. You've said that those lives don't matter. And we insist that those lives do matter. They will matter. And they are mattering right now. So free Sudan! 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 Free Sudan!